Hi, everyone. Welcome to Both Sides of the Story, PBS 12's high school debate tournament. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thanks for joining us. This is our first semi-final round of our 2020 tournament. On tonight's show, students from Mountain Vista High School and George Washington High School face off for a spot in this year's championship. So let's meet our participants. This is going to be a good one. First up, Ria Scaria, a senior at Mountain Vista High School. Let's meet Ria.
My name is Ria. I am a senior and I go to Mountain Vista High School.
Ria's debate style is similar to her personality. She's calm, she's fluid, she's focused, and she does a very good job of asking questions to her opponent that really strengthens her own case.
I think there are countless things that you can address right now and that require our attention right now. But I think the biggest thing that I would like to focus on, or the biggest thing that's really kind of been hitting me, is the Black Lives Matter movement, everything following George Floyd's death, and actually just the continued injustices against the African American community in this nation. If you love your country, you recognize when your country has gone wrong, and if you love your country, you do what you can as a citizen to improve your country.
That's Ria. Now, let's meet Katie Jack, a junior at George Washington High School. Here's her story.
My name's Katie Jack, and I'm a junior at George Washington High School. One of my favorite moments in debate was probably participating in the online nationals tournament this year. I had a team that I was debating with, and we all got to talk about these really important issues, and it was just with people who also cared about them a lot. So it was a really powerful experience for me. Debate's really important right now because it teaches young people how to use their voices in order to stand up for something that they believe in. And I think that's really important in light of this pandemic and also in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and other important social movements that are pushing for progress and change. And the way that those two things come is by young people and people of all ages being able to speak up for what they believe in. And speech and debate directly teaches individuals how to do that.
Every time I see her on one of our Google Meet calls, she's so happy and so enthusiastic that I feel I can be happy and enthusiastic as well. And we're going to get through this.
Also joining us, our special panel of experts who will offer their analysis of our debate this evening. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4. He is joined by Natasha Gardner, a freelance journalist and regular panelist on Colorado Inside Out. Natasha, great to have you join us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's set our ground rules. Each side will present their case, ask each other questions, and have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it's finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their own questions, and we'll find out whom they felt offered the best argument. So let's get started. Here is the issue up for debate. Is social media here in the United States, is it beneficial for democratic values? Let's have our coin flip right now. We'll get it underway. Ria, I'm going to have you go ahead and call it. Heads or tails?
Heads.
And heads it is. You get your pick. What would you like, the proponent side or the negative side?
The negative side, please.
For Ria, that means Katie, as the proponent during this round, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. Go ahead and get started.
All right. I affirm the resolution which states resolved. In the United States, social media is beneficial for democratic values. Contention 1. Social media platforms democratize information by allowing for all people to have access to it and have their voices heard. According to David Weinberger in 2019, before social media, the information you could get about a candidate or political issue depended on what the news media and the politicians chose to say. If you wanted to do a deep dive on something, you were probably out of luck. If you had questions about your chosen issue, there was likely no one you could ask. But now social media makes it easy. You can share what you dig up on the internet, ask questions, propose answers, and talk with others to explore what's going on and what it means. Social media allows for everyone to have their voices heard. According to Ethan Zuckerman in 2018, the importance of social media in informing us is that it provides a channel for those excluded by the news, whether through censorship or through disinterest or ignorance, to have their voices and issues heard. When Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, many people learned of his death, the protests that unfolded in the wake, and the militarized response to those protests via Twitter. Social media is critically important for giving voice to communities who've been systemically excluded from media: people of color, women, LGBTQ people, poor people. By giving people a chance to share their undercovered perspectives, social media has a possible role in making the media ecosystem more inclusive and fair. Contention 2: social media is the driving force behind political organizing today and thus serves as a pillar for modern democracy. Social media leads to real solutions in the problems we see in the world. According to Cass Sunstein in 2020, when democracies are functioning properly, people's sufferings and challenges are not entirely private matters. Social media platforms help us alert one another to 1,000,001 different problems. In the process, the existence of social media can prod citizens to seek solutions. According to Ethan Zuckerman in 2018, the power of social media to raise money for candidates, recruit people to participate in marches and rallies, to organize boycotts or products or the overthrow of governments is one of the best documented and most debated powers of social media. A wave of campaigns have connected primarily online action to real world change. A strong example of this is the Me Too movement. According to David Weinberger in 2019, thanks to social media, powerful political movements have arisen that had real effects. For example, rather than relying on a complicated political organization, the Me Too movement formed around a simple hashtag, as women posted personal stories of sexual harassment on social media without any formal organizing or leaders. This movement has been successful in exposing wrongdoing and changing attitudes. A democracy is a government for and by the people, which means that the promotion of democratic values comes when people are able to use their voices to incite change within their community. Social media has proven to allow just that. For these reasons, I stand in firm affirmation.
Okay, Katie, thank you very much. Now, Rhea, you have 2 minutes for any questions and cross-examination. Go right ahead.
So you mentioned how social media can help political organization or organizing. I was wondering if actual legislation or policy is actually passed due to this political organizations created by or started by social media.
Sure. So if we're looking at like the Black Lives Matter movement within the United States, we can see that there are policies such as like ending qualified immunity, making police officers wear body cams. And then also certain places are allocating more money towards other like social services besides police departments. So these are all policy changes that are created. And one way in order to actually have them happen on a wider scale is by voting people into office who are going to enact these changes. And that happens by changing public opinion, which these protests have absolutely done.
I agree with you that protests have actually done that, but would you say that those changes or the power of the Black Lives Matter movement can be attributed mainly to social media?
Yeah, I definitely think so because we saw the video journey because of social media. Like information is spread very rapidly through these platforms, and it allows for everybody to be able to spread their opinions and give their voice on certain issues, especially people who have been underrepresented in the past, which is something I bring up in my first contention.
Okay, so on that point, in terms of you said that you can spread a lot of information pretty quickly. So wouldn't you then also agree that wrong information can also be spread just as quickly?
There can be wrong information, but there are policies that could be in place in order to stop that. And my argument here is that there are things social media platforms can do to prevent that negative outcome, but social platforms they themselves are what allow for everybody to be able to say they democratize information, and that is a benefit that's unique to them. So absolutely fix the problems that could arise, but you can't just say that it's not good for democracy when we see that it plays a huge role in people actually making change in the community.
All right, we're going to need to end the questions right there. The question of the day we're debating is social media beneficial for democratic values here in the United States? Now, Rhea, the floor is yours with the negative side for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I stand in firm negation of the motion that in the United States, social media is beneficial for democratic values. To begin this debate, defining what exactly are our core democratic values is essential to addressing this topic. Our Declaration of Independence and focal points of recent issues reveal our values of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, justice, equality, diversity, and truth, among many others. Much of the affirmative side's arguments rely on the need for active participation on social media. However, this notion from the get-go is flawed. According to the Pew Research Center, a major insight into human behavior from pre-internet era studies of communication is the tendency of people not to speak up about policy issues in public or among family, friends, and work colleagues when they believe that their own point of view is not widely shared. This tendency is called the spiral of silence. The hope with social media is that the tendency is broken down. The Pew Research Center conducted a survey of 1,801 adults focusing on Edward Snowden's 2013 revelations of widespread government surveillance of Americans' phones and email records. They found that 86% of Americans were willing to have an in-person conversation about the surveillance problems, but only 42% of Facebook and Twitter users were willing to post about it on those platforms. And of the 14% of Americans unwilling to discuss a story in person with others, only 0.3% were willing to post about it on social media. So if social media de-incentivizes the majority of its users to engage in political discourse or post content pertaining to policy or public issues, most of the benefits of the app world proposes falters. With a fifth of all the adults in the United States saying that they turn most to social media for political and election news, and with social media apps with power such as having about 340,000 extra people turn out to vote in the 2010 US congressional election because of just a single election day Facebook message, social media has unregulated power to the extent where it acts as de facto governments without precautionary checks and balances in place. Although it's a news source for many, it often pushes agenda, not truth, which is another core democratic value. A new study by 3 MIT scholars reveals that false news stories are 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories are. It also takes true stories about 6 times as long to reach 1,500 people as it does for false stories to reach the same number of people. When it comes to Twitter's cascades or unbroken tweet chains, falsehood reaches a cascade depth of 10, about 20 times faster than facts. And falsehoods are retweeted by unique users more broadly than true statements at every depth of the cascade. Disinformation poisons Americans' views of real-world issues to fit the opinions of those controlling the dials. Let's put aside politics for a moment and focus on the democratic value of life and the preamble's value of general welfare. The rate of non-suicidal self-injury ranges between 14 and 21% among young people. Evidence suggests that the greater time spent on online social networking promotes self-harm behavior and suicidal ideation in vulnerable adolescents, threatening life and general welfare. Because social media threatens virtually every single core democratic value, I stand in firm negation.
Rhea, thank you very much, Rhea. We'll have to cut you off right there. Katie, 2 minutes for questions begins right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so you started off by saying that as the app, I am making the assumption that people engage in discourse online. But how can you say that that statement is false when we see what the Black Lives Matter movement has done and we see what the Me Too movement has done?
So yes, Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement have had an online presence or kind of an online participation aspect to it, but it does not discount the fact of the facts. There are several other issues that are addressed on social media, not just major movements or liberal movements like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement.
Okay.
And the social media actually de-incentivizes a lot of users in engaging in those.
Okay. But the study you cited, it only talks about one issue, and that's just Edward Snowden releasing information, right? That is the only thing it covers.
That is the one that it studied, but it's not necessarily, it's basically using that as a model to determine what the effect of social media is on de-incentivizing people.
Sure. The idea of social media is not that everybody has to speak on platforms. It's just that they can if they want to, right?
Yeah, I understand that. But with a lot of the policies and a lot of the benefits that the app world is proposing, that participation is necessary. And if that participation is not, if there's an incentive to not participate, then those benefits don't necessarily exist to the fullest extent.
What's the incentive to not participate?
The incentive to not participate would be the fear of of judgment, I guess, or the fear of people not accepting your viewpoint, which is even more prevalent on social media.
Lastly, you said social media can influence elections, and your evidence for that is that there's more voter turnout. Can you explain why that's bad?
So if you send out a single election day Facebook message, which is what pushed that kind of voter turnout, the voter turnout and the way that they vote need not just be pushing people to vote. It can be pushing people to vote in a specific manner. So yes, it does very much skew elections based off of what types of ads are put out.
Okay.
All right, we're going to have to wrap up this round of questions right there. Katie Jack from George Washington and Ria Scaria from Mountain Vista. Katie, with the affirmative, you now have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. Go ahead.
Okay, so looking over my opponent's case, she starts off by talking about democratic values. And one really important one is going to be freedom of speech, which social media absolutely amplifies. Also importantly, in a democracy, people have to be able to speak their mind. It's also important that there be an educated electorate. And like I proved in my first contention, when you have social media, more people can learn about political candidates, more people can use their voices. So it's absolutely improving democracy. Then my opponent talks about the spiral of silence. And basically, first off, we need to recognize the fact that people clearly do speak up on social media. You see that in the Black Lives Matter movement. You see it in the Me Too movement. It's not just an assumption like my opponent tries to make it seem like. She's also citing one study, and this one study talks about a specific issue. It's just Edward Snowden releasing information. That's the only thing it covers. So that's not going to be enough when I have countless examples talking about these big movements that have been spurred by social media that have created change and improved our democracy. And so she's talking about this one issue, but again, you need to look at other things more specifically. Also, when you have social media, it's not that everybody has to speak up on it. So if there's a lower percentage of people talking on social media, that's an okay thing. The point of social media is that you can speak up on it. That's what's important. It allows for anybody to be able to use their voices. If they choose not to, that's their decision. But at least they have the option to do it now, where they wouldn't have had that option in the past. Next, she talks about how social media can influence elections, and she says it drives voter turnout. This is a good thing. Voter turnout improves democracy. It allows for more people to consent to the government. And then she says that it sways which way people are voting, but doesn't actually provide any evidence to specifically say that. Then moving on to her last point, she talked about how false news stories spread quickly. Again, this is not like necessarily true, and there are things that can be put in place in order to stop this. Like for instance, seen in 2020, platforms can provide safeguards in the event that the democratic processes are being intentionally disrupted or harmful falsehoods are spreading. It can help people find out what is true. So there are things that social media platforms can do in order to prevent this. It doesn't outweigh the tremendous impacts and good consequences it causes within a democracy.
Katie, thank you very much. The question of the day we are debating here is social media beneficial for democratic values here in the United States? You've heard Katie with the affirmative, Ria in the negative. You have 3 minutes to respond and close. Go.
So starting off with my opponent's case, my opponent mentions how social media promotes democratization and just kind of democracy by having political participation through social media. However, what social media also encourages is kind of a disconnect with our representatives and a disconnect with actually doing groundwork, where internet activism kind of replaces on-ground activism in terms of going to protests and things like that. Yes, my opponent does make the argument that internet activism is a big part of movements like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement, but a lot of people could use that as an excuse to not actually go out and protest, to not actually go out and write to our representatives, to not actually go out and vote by simply just having our opinion out there on social media. And then moving on to my opponent's next point about Michael Brown and the militarized protest and giving minorities voices. Yes, that is a benefit of social media, but there are many other avenues of getting those voices out there as well, especially with our current political climate, focusing on making those abilities even more better. And additionally, what's another thing to remember is polarization and radical ideas. My opponent said that information spreads quickly because of social media. False information spreads just as quickly. If you go back to my evidence that I spread, false information reaches people at 70% more of a chance than true information. So if people are drawn to false information and people are acting based off of false information, based off my opponent's Black Lives Matter examples and things like that, if people are acting and taking action based off of false information, that is not preserving democracy. That is keeping people at risk, which is not promoting general welfare, and that's not promoting life, and that can be infringing on other people's liberties, which are infringing and kind of deteriorating our democratic values. On to our last point of political organization. While she mentions Black Lives Matter and Me Too, we also have to remember that white supremacy exists on social media. We also have to remember groups like QAnon. Just on October 19th, just yesterday, QAnon made it onto the news. My opponent said that there are safeguards against false information, but what we have to remember is what people do with that false information on social media is out of social media's control. What people do with that is that they can take that onto news websites. For example, just yesterday on Fox News, Senator Johnson and the Fox News host of the day made a connection between Hunter Biden and QAnon, which is a conspiracy theory positing that President Donald Trump is secretly fighting an international cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles, and that has made its way onto the news because of social media. QAnon started on social media, and it's made it onto the news. So if social media's negative effects are being seen on social media and are spreading radicalized idea both on credible news platforms and on ground levels, we have to see that it's only a threat to democratic values.
All right, Rhea, we'll have to end your arguments there. Finally, Katie, 1 minute to close. Go ahead.
Okay, so just briefly going over a couple things with my opponent's last speech. First of all, she didn't respond to any of the attacks I had on her case, but I'm going to respond to some of the things she said in defense of her own. So first of all, she's talking about how other avenues to get people's voices out there. But my evidence talks specifically about how social media is the first time that people who have been previously excluded by traditional forms of media can have a say within politics and within our democracy. She doesn't say what other avenues are going to allow for this to happen, doesn't give a single example. So this isn't good evidence, whereas I have evidence talking specifically about how social media is the right avenue. Then she talks about how false information can spread quickly. Again, she doesn't have evidence of people acting upon that false information, whereas I have a lot of evidence talking about people actually making changes because of what they've learned on social media and what they've heard and what they've been able to say to others. And so this is really important because I'm actually discussing examples of what this action is. She says that there's a disconnect on the ground and then online, but this isn't true because my second contention completely disproves it and shows that social media spurs these activism actions and actually creates change within a democracy. And for these reasons, I can only foresee the judges voting for the affirmative.
Katie, thank you very much. Rhea, thank you very much. An outstanding debate from two debate all-stars in our state. Let's go to our panel of experts right now and get their thoughts on what they saw. Dominic, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Both Rhea, Katie, both did a fantastic job, but your job is not over. You get a couple of questions from our judging panel. Natasha, I'm going to throw it to you first for your question for Katie.
Yeah, you've spent quite a bit of time talking about how this social media can give voices to members of our society, and also talking about how it can spread false information. And to combat that, you talked about using tools to fix the problems. But isn't that in fact censorship and against democratic ideals?
So again, it's looking for the most positive outcome that you can provide. And so if stopping the spread of false information stops people from being misinformed, then I think that it is a good thing to do because this misinformation can be harmful. But when you look at the difference between all the positive information that's being spread and all the real action that's taking place because of it, I think that absolutely outweighs any drawbacks that my opponent might have discussed, especially when I have more examples of the positives. And so for these reasons, I think that the fact that social media provides these unique benefits means that it is good for democracy.
So, Katie, now I get a chance to throw a question to you. You talk about the different positive influence that other actors on social media can have, but social media is open to everybody, including people who want to harm the United States, not just people who might be speaking their minds in the United States, but also in other countries, let's say Russia. Do the benefits to our democracy from people inside our country outweigh the potential harms from outside actors that could use social media as a way to disrupt democratic values in the United States?
Yes, I would say that it outweighs these problems because I talked about ways that you can address issues such as foreign interference, which isn't necessarily something my opponent even brought up. But what's important to consider here is that when you have the resolution looking at within the United States, we see that it allows for people to have a voice, and most specifically people who are marginalized. So that's a very clear benefit. And when people have this voice, we hear about the problems that are in society, and people actually create change and make a difference within the democracy. So that's going to outweigh interference that can be combated by certain policies that I talked about in my Manson card.
Well, Rhea, you're not off the hook yet. You get a question from us as well. Natasha, why don't you have your first question for Rhea?
Yes, you spoke about the spiral of silence and a lot of the negative things that can come out of social media, but also there's at least some people who are willing to share their political beliefs on those platforms. If we throw away this tool, are we in fact throwing away something that could be fixed or improved for the benefit of our democracy?
So I would argue that for those people that are willing to share that kind of information, they're quite strong in their beliefs of it. And when we say they're strong in their beliefs of it, they need not be pushing the right agenda, right? So taking away that platform could be taking away or toning down radical ideas, people who are very strong and set in their beliefs and promote polarization as opposed to an open discussion, which is what exists outside of social media.
Rhea, I guess I would go kind of when you talked about in the very first part of your case about the defining the values in life, liberty, justice, equality, truth. A big part of that is boiled into the First Amendment of the United States in the Constitution. Some have said social media is basically a purified version of the First Amendment. Everyone that wants to speak their mind can, and it can be heard or ignored by anybody out there. How is that not supportive of the democratic values of the United States?
So the thing with the First Amendment is it's like the freedom of speech, it's the freedom of press, it's all of those different kinds of things. But there are limits to it when it comes to imposing on other people's freedoms. So when you promoting when you freely speaking on social media promotes other people taking action that's working on infringing upon other people's rights, that's when that freedom of speech starts to breach into taking away freedoms from other people, which is that kind of radicalization of those movements is what happens with social media a lot of the times.
Katie, Rhea, both did a fantastic job. Ellen, I wish we have another half an hour that Natasha and I could banter back and forth and figure out the winner, because it's such a simple topic. I mean, social media and democracy, it's really cut and dry. But give us a second so we can figure this out.
We have some tremendous debaters here today. We're going to give our panel a moment to consider whom they felt won this debate, and that'll give me a moment to let you know that we are right smack dab in the middle of this year's tournament. Our 2020 tournament will feature 12 total debates, including a full consolation bracket, so you'll get a chance to see all of our students debate multiple times, and we have some great ones this fall. To catch up on any of the episodes, you can go to pbs12.org. All right, Dominic, do you have a decision?
Like I said, Rhea and Katie, you were handed a very difficult topic. All it is the future of our democracy and the whole idea of the First Amendment. Very, very cut and dry, easy to figure out. You both did a fantastic job. It's a debate like this that shows me how proud I am to be able to tell what this series is all about. It is our job, Natasha and myself, to pick a winner so we know who moves on to the championship. Even though both cases were great, Katie, we decided that your argumentation won the day. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Good debate.
Well, thank you very much. And Alan, back to you. What a wonderful debate.
Yeah, absolutely tremendous. Two awesome debaters. Katie, you're going to now go on to the championship round. And Rhea Scaria, we will see you in our third place match. You both gave our viewers a wonderful debate tonight. You both should be very proud. Katie Jack of George Washington High and Rhea Scaria of Mountain Vista High School. You did your schools well. That's all the time we have for our program tonight. I want to thank our excellent students for accepting our challenge and for participating in our debate. I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts. And finally, we want to thank you for tuning in. It is the support of viewers like you and our sponsors that helps to make this show a reality. You can catch up on past episodes of this program on pbs12.org, and you can catch me on CBS4 for all the latest news and information impacting Colorado. For everyone here at PBS 12, I'm Alan Janae. Thanks for watching, and that is Both Sides of the Story.